The Finance Ministry says AMMB Holdings has agreed to pay 2.83 billion ringgit to the government as settlement on all outstanding claims and actions in relation to the group's involvement in the 1MDB scandal. As part of the terms for the global settlement, the Securities Commission will require M Investment Bank to take corrective measures, including putting in place systems and processes to strengthen its due diligence framework for submission of corporate proposals. Finance Minister Tengku Datuk Sri Zafrul Abdul Aziz says the settlement is beneficial for the Malaysian people, as resorting to the courts would have cost plenty of time, money and resources. With this settlement, the payment will be expedited and utilised to fulfil 1MDB's outstanding obligations. The settlement is on top of a 53.7 million ringgit penalty previously imposed by Bank Negara and already paid by the Ambank Group. The Finance Ministry said this latest development will not affect or compromise Malaysia's claims against individuals like Lotek Jo, 1MDB ex-General Counsel Jasmine Lu and other parties linked to the scandal and who are still being pursued by the authorities. National oil giant Petronas posted its first ever annual loss of 21 billion ringgit for FY20, dragged by a 31.5 billion ringgit impairment charge on assets. Last year, it recorded a profit after tax of 40.5 billion ringgit. Meanwhile, revenue shrank nearly 26% to 178.7 billion ringgit amid plummeting oil prices along with demand disruptions during the year. However, the group points out that the drop in revenue was the lowest among the international oil majors. For the fourth quarter of FY20, Petronas posted a net loss of 1.1 billion ringgit versus a profit after tax of 4.1 billion ringgit previously, due to 1.3 billion ringgit impairment loss on assets. Revenue was down by 31.3% to 44 billion ringgit. Petronas President and Group CEO Tengku Muhammad Taufik Tengku Aziz says the group has weathered the toughest period in its history. Going forward, Petronas is cautiously optimistic. The outlook remains challenging, with modest recovery in demand and prices as the COVID-19 impact continues. It will pay the government 18 billion ringgit in dividends this year. Last year, the total payout was 34 billion ringgit. CIMB Group saw a 75% slump in fourth quarter FY20 earnings, weighed down by elevated loan provisions. Quarterly net profit fell to 214.98 million ringgit, though revenue grew 4% to 4.7 billion ringgit. Earnings per share stood at 2.17 sen versus 8.56 sen in the previous corresponding period. For the full year, net profit shrank by 74% to 1.19 million ringgit, while top line inched 3% lower to 17.19 billion ringgit. Group CEO Dato' Abdul Rahman Ahmad points out the lender's most immediate priority in FY20 was cost management, and in this regard, he says it surpassed its FY20 cost reduction target of 5%. For the fourth quarter of 2020, he says CIMB is also encouraged to see quarterly top-line improvement in the net interest and non-interest income in its core markets. The group proposed an annual dividend of 4.81 sen per share. As for FY21, CIMB will maintain a cautious growth stance, with performance to improve with lower provisioning. This is amid uneven economic recovery, with downside risks in the short term before improving in the second half of 2020. The Employees Provident Fund has launched the world's first and largest Sharia private equity direct or co-investment separate managed account fund with an allocation of $600 million or 2.43 billion ringgit. The fund will have 3 accounts of $200 million each to be managed by BlackRock, Harbourvest Partners and Partners Group, with a global mandate that focuses on direct and co-investment strategies into growth and buyout transactions. The investment period is from 2021 to 2025, while the fund term will run from 2021 to 2031, subject to further extensions with the EPF's consent. CEO Tunku Ali Zakri alias says the retirement fund has been working on the initiative since 2018 as it seeks to diversify its investment portfolio to ensure sustainable returns to its members. Its private equity arm has 106 active investments with a total commitment of 12.05 billion ringgit. As of the second quarter of 2020, the top 3 regions in which the EPF had invested under its private equity mandates are North America, Europe, and Greater China. The Naga National saw its fourth quarter FY20 net profit surge 85% to 1.21 billion ringgit from a year earlier. This was due mainly to higher tax credits resulting from the claim of the reinvestment allowance incentive. In a board's filing today, the utility giant said revenue for the quarter fell 15% to 10.32 billion ringgit due to lower sales of electricity to customers in the commercial and industrial segments, which were affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. Earnings per share rose to 21.27 sen from 11.49 sen. TNB declared a final single-tier dividend of 18 sen and a special single-tier dividend of 40 sen. For FY20, earnings fell 21% to 3.59 billion ringgit as revenue tumbled by 14% to 43.98 billion ringgit. On its prospects, TNB says while near-term growth will be affected by the stricter containment measures, the impact will be less severe than that experienced in 2020. It expects growth to improve from the second quarter onwards, driven by the recovery in global demand and policy measures, including Penjana, Kita Prihatin, Budget 2021 and Permai.